Coming up, it is, of course, kickoff week for the New York Football Giants, and we dive in on the unofficial depth chart ahead of the Week 1 matchup with the Dallas Cowboys, looking at that offensive line and finally cementing who we hope will be the starters going forward. Some other notes around record predictions from Andy and myself, and also why this Week 1 of the 2023 season is critical for one Daniel Jones. Yes, sir. It is, of course, OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where you know that we are your hosts. Over here, Adam Armbrecht breaking down the Brooklyn Nets and the Locked On Nets podcast with Doug Norrie and your New Jersey Devils on the Devils Puck Luck podcast with Danny McDonough. But I'm joined, as always, by the generational season ticket holder, the pulse of the New York Football Giants fan base, Mr. Andrew Makowitz, coming to you live from a resort somewhere south of the border. How are we, sir?
I'm good, Adam. Shout out to the droves of Giant fans that recognized me and OGP in Mexico City. So congrats to all them. It was like, I know Taylor Swift performed here a couple days ago, but I have to feel like it was very similar as I was walking through some of the streets here.
Please, people, I'm here on vacation with my family, if you could. So, listen, a world traveler and being recognized, Andrew Makowitz as well. As we dive into our continued weekly preview coverage, when we get to our Friday episode, that's going to be our predictions for the actual game, some of the key matchups we're going to talk about. And as you're watching this on Wednesday, remember yesterday's episode last night, we had Coach Ed, Coach G, whichever you want to refer to him. He said we can go either way we want. Broke down some good offensive line when it came to Evan Neal and also Smith Jr., the matchups they're going to face. So check that out and prepare for Thursday when we'll be breaking down the rookie cornerbacks starting on the outside, something we'll discuss from a depth perspective here, obviously, as well. But, Andy, where we have to start when we talk about the unofficial depth chart is right there on the offensive line. You and I wonder if others were waiting for it as well, assumed that Ben Bredeson was the insurance policy and someone was going to claim the other guard spot. Maybe we hoped for Joshua Ezuedu. It comes out Bredeson is labeled there as the starter at left guard. You have backup roles at the center position for Shane Lemieux, and then Matt Peart, who we knew just by looking at the roster was going to be the backup swing tackle. Where are you in terms of being surprised that it was Bredeson that ends up getting the start? I have a somewhat, I think, surprising take that I didn't realize I should have had all along, probably.
Yeah, you know what? This is actually pretty unsurprising, knowing that Bredeson practiced at multiple positions. He's a little bit more experienced, and we kind of need that across this offensive line with John Michael Schmitz starting at center. So you kind of think the team went with a little bit more veteran leadership at the guard position. The first thing I think about is, I don't know, is this going to be the offensive line that we're going to see in week 3? I have no idea, to be fully honest with you, Adam. Is Glowinski going to look better than he did last season? Maybe. Is Bredeson gonna struggle at times? Could there be an injury across the offensive line? For me, this kind of feels like the safest way for the Giants to go week 1 against Dallas. But, as we mentioned before, who knows what this could look like? It seems like a fluid situation over the course of the season.
What do you think is more likely, that Ben Bredeson is overtaken by a Joshua Ezuedu, or that Glowinski ends up losing his starting role at some point? Because the hype train has really been around the quality of Bredeson all camp long. Glowinski, going back even to the time of the signing, it wasn't meant to be this stalwart, but we've been, lukewarm on him at best. Do you think that there's a chance that that's actually where the transition comes here at any of these spots? There's only 2. Nothing's happening at tackles or center positions. If it does, we're in a world of trouble.
Yeah, the versatility of Bredeson makes him feel like he has the potential to stick around on the roster longer term than someone like Glowinski. Remember, the Giants can pretty much get out of his contract at the end of the year if it doesn't work out. It was one of Joe Shane's first big free agent signings, was trying to shore up the offensive line. And Glowinski struggled, and fans have noticed. And a lot of fans on Twitter and otherwise that have studied the offensive line realized that he really struggled last season. And so, Adam, I actually think that Glowinski has a bigger target on his back to say, if he's not getting it done, let's go with the younger guy in Ezuedu. Let's see what this offensive line could look like moving forward, knowing it's so young across the entire piece of it.
And you probably feel like you have the opportunity, to your point, with Bredeson and his versatility. Well, Bredeson could go over the right guard spot and allow Ezuedu to go into left guard. Whatever feels like the most comfortable transition, maybe that's the benefit, too, of having a guy like Bredeson. And by the way, Shane Lemieux is listed at depth guard as well for the New York Football Giants. So there's flexibility there. I mean, I think the dream scenario for Giants fans is just that, as much as we may want to see Ezuedu or anything else, is just have consistency, have stability from week one. I'd hate to see this be the starting rotation on the offensive line in week one. And then in week two, we're talking about a little change. And in week three, we're talking about going back, right? So those kind of things are interesting. And just on Lemieux, his depth is listed center and at left guard. So the right guard spot, where does this logjam kind of develop?
Yeah,
When we turn our attention, go ahead, yeah.
it seems very simple, but to your point, that this is the starting lineup that we see in week 5 or week 6. Because if it's not, then either there's an injury or something has gone horribly wrong for the Giants. I think it goes without saying, but something to monitor. Give it to the veteran leadership early on. See if they can right the ship, so to speak. And if you can't, you go for one of these other guys as a spark plug, like Ezuedu, or as you mentioned, Shane Lemieux.
Which is surprising. And I mean, listen, we know Matt Peart's on this roster now as the backup swing tackle, so we shouldn't be surprised by the way the depth is shake out to this point. And by the way, there still can be changes to this roster. We remember from last season, Joe Shane is active. He's watching the other waiver wires. He's watching to see what other rosters need to do just from a positional standpoint. And sometimes when an injury happens, not on an offensive line spot, but it forces a depth piece to shake free from another team. Turn our attention over to this. Flip to the defensive side, because I think this is more interesting than what will be our final note taking away from this depth chart. McFadden's going to start at inside linebacker for the New York Giants. I don't find this surprising. You talk about how Wink Martindale referred to him. We know that Darian Beavers got cut, made it through to the practice squad, so we expect that to be a longer-term development there. Is your anticipation that this is about Isaiah Simmons coming in late, off the trade, needing time to get acclimated? Or has McFadden really cemented himself in this role? And we can just think about Isaiah Simmons, as much as we say he's going to play inside linebacker by all reports, they're going to use him in some different ways, and there's no reason to plug him into a starting role this moment.
Yeah, they asked Wink, and his unofficial starting lineup is a 3-3-5 nickel type defense.
Yeah.
So, listen, Micah McFadden is the starter. They talked about him all preseason in the spring in training camp as a guy that started to assert himself and try to get one of those starting linebackers positions. He clearly solidified that with the release of Darian Beavers and then subsequently joining the practice squad. This is not a surprise to me at all. I think you mentioned not enough time for Simmons to really get in there and say, I'm going to play 70 snaps on defense. It just doesn't feel like he's prepared to do that. But I think that's the point with Simmons, is you situationally bring him in as a freak athlete that can either get after the quarterback or really give the defense some different looks. So for me, it seems like McFadden is the safer play. And I think you'll see Simmons probably on Sunday Night Football come in a handful of snaps, whether it's 5 or 10, in different positions where we're looking to rush the quarterback, where we want secondary help, where we know to be third and long. I could definitely see him playing a role, but I'm sure that you and I, as we see the unofficial depth chart come out, this wasn't that much of a surprise, much like Bredeson wasn't either, right?
No. Yeah. And what this looks like, and that's actually kind of, I think the final note on this is, what do we think by the end of the year? Does Isaiah Simmons play more snaps? Does he get more reps by the end of the year than Micah McFadden? Because that's the real question here. As he learns the system, as he gets acclimated, does he transition into a full-time role? Or, to your point about where we think he's going to be used in the short term, these key spots, bring him on the field, let the other team know, yeah, watch out. He's got speed. He's coming after you. And that's okay because he is such that athlete. It's a reminder. He was let go for financial reasons and also because he'd never quite figured it out with the Arizona Cardinals. And we're very confident that that's more to do with the Arizona Cardinals than it is to do with Isaiah Simmons, but you still need to see it, right? So you have to detach the name from the optimism and just say, let's see how it goes. But do you think that he'll end up overtaking McFadden at some point?
Well, I don't actually think so. I mean, the talent there clearly in the pedigree of coming from Clemson, being a Swiss Army knife. Obviously, you mentioned the challenges in Arizona. He never really had a position. He was kind of in between safety, in between linebacker. I just think the versatility that Wink Martin can put him out there with, especially with a 3-3-5, is he can kind of be in that secondary, but also up against the line, rushing the court. So I don't really know if he's ever going to solidify a starting position in the middle linebacking core. more because of Wink's creativity on defense than necessarily whether or not he's better than McFadden. I could really see it's situationally where it's like, hey, we need a guy that really can get up into the line like McFadden and actually have a better tackle rate than someone like Simmons. I think it's going to be a lot of situational where it's like, is this a pass play? Is this historically a run play? What does it look like for the defense? And I think I think ideally for Wake Martindale, it could look like a 50-50 split, if not more Isaiah Simmons, because that means the other team is trying to pass the ball more on the Giants.
Right. Yeah. So you like to be there playing from behind on down and distances, and then you can bring in your speed packages. Hey, remember the term? The NASCAR package to get
Yes.
after the quarterback and put the pressure on him. Little note quickly here also across the defensive front. Basham's going to be backing up Thibodeau. We know the Ward's going to be behind Ojulari there, obviously on the outside. So we'll wait to see how these guys get utilized. And I think unlike last year, health being, assumed, the Giants got deeper across that defensive front, so when you need to rotate guys, keep Dexter Lawrence healthy, keep Leonard Williams healthy and fresh. But then you think about, I think those edge rushing groups, I think that they actually might get dialed up in terms of the number of reps that they're specifically going to be asked to do. Before we even do, I'll just quickly note here, we're going to get into the running back room because I don't know if you or the fans, I find this fascinating when it comes to Gray and to Brightwell, but worth also mentioning here that in the secondary, the backup safeties are going to be Dane Belton and rookie Gervarious Owens. You have the veteran Bobby McCain on the third team line. I just wanted to note that I love this because Dane Belton's a second-year guy. We know he had a little bit of injuries. We saw him in camp. Really looks like he has this nose for the football kind of mentality. Gervarious Owens showed up and played well. We always talk about this, and even as the expectations for this team rise, I want the young players ready to have an opportunity. And I just love the idea that Belton and then even Gervarious Owens, especially in what could be a secondary heavy defense at times, that they could have a chance to make some plays here early in their careers. It's good.
Yeah, and when you think about what's going on with Xavier McKinney, obviously he's eligible for a new deal, but hasn't been able to come up with one. What does this team look like in 18 months? It might look drastically different in the secondary. Developing players like Owens, seeing Dane Belton, grab backup role to someone like Pinnock, seeing how Wink wants to do it. There's so much fluidity between the linebacking core and the secondary. Like Adam, the way that I'm picturing this is Wink Martindale could throw out any number of linebackers, cornerbacks, and safeties on the field at any given moment and call it a 3-3-5, right? Like it doesn't really matter what it is. I think Isaiah Simmons legitimately can line up as like an edge rusher or inside or as a nickel corner type of safety position. And that's good for the Giants to have that versatility because you don't really know what that means with the other pieces. Well, it kind of confuses the offense a little bit.
Oh, 100%. There's 3-3-5 worlds where, Isaiah Simmons is in the middle and you have Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari, and those are the three, right? Not that you're taking Bobby Okereke off the field for big situations, but think about those third, and let's talk about like the third and desperates. Yeah, that's where I just want dudes that can fly around the field like maniacs and we'll be able to keep their body around players or bring those Wink Martindale blitzes. I'm very excited for the Giants to get into more of those 3-3-5 packages, especially situationally, because the roster, the depth, the pieces now speak more to the ability to execute as opposed to last season underneath Wink. Last note from a depth standpoint, and then I'll ask Andy if he has any other ones as well. Again, I like me some special teams. Andy knows this. Eric Gray claims the both top punt returning spot and the top kick returning spot. That's great. Brightwell was hurt during the training camp. He had some injuries, so he gets to claim that. And it's really good that the rookie has the role. However, he is fourth on the depth chart in the backfield for the running back room. And I guess maybe this would speak to, as much as anything, why Matt Breida is still here. Because Gary Brightwell has an injury. Maybe they don't fully think that Eric Gray is ready for that backfield role, though I think we'll see him get used. So you can't, right? You can't risk saying, I got a guy in Brightwell that hasn't been able to be healthy this offseason and a rookie running back. We have to keep this veteran around. Does it excite you as much as me that we're going to see Eric Gray as the primary guy back? I'm like, it's someone new. It's a new thing you get to see as an opening night football here for the Giants.
Maybe it interests you a little bit more than it does to me. It seems like, from what we've seen so far with the unofficial depth chart, nothing really too surprising. I guess it would have been a little surprising if Brightwell was making the roster and he wasn't either returning kicks or being third. You almost kind of look at it and say,
oh, yeah. Now, if Gary Brightwell made the roster,
Eric Gray, yeah,
right, wasn't returning anything and also was fourth on the depth chart, then we'd be going. So then just run this back for me one time and explain what's happening here. Yeah, so that's a really good point. You would assume he at least has some kind of role, which we did say, like last year, he showed in his opportunities. He looked like a running back that has taken nice developmental steps forward in his career.
Yeah, he made some chunky plays when given the opportunity at running back. I think that they don't want to just give him a huge carry load or return load. And I think it's going to be interchangeable again. I think Gray might be back there for a while. You could see Brightwell a little bit. There's probably situations where Gray's going to be in on some third downs or different things, just to give the defense a little bit of a different look. I kind of expected them to split duties whichever way you wanted to dice and splice it. I'm pretty happy with the way that Mike Kafka and the offense are looking at things.
And oh, by the way, this will be fluid week to week, not about players and performances, but about matchups, right? The depth chart gets updated every single week all throughout this season. So you could see changes get made here based on what we're going to see on the field from the opposition. And then also, obviously, based on performance. Let's take. Go ahead. We got one more depth. Go ahead. Go.
I just had one more depth thing. I appreciate you carrying the load here, really setting it all up. But was there anything interesting that you found about the wide receiver position? It was talked about all of camp. It was talked about like who's going to make the roster, who's not. We saw that Cole Beasley made it to the practice squad, but then got put on IR, so he was out for 4 games. Makes you wonder if he was going to make the 53-man roster if he was healthy to begin with. But they also announced that the 3-man starting group is Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, and
Paris Campbell.
Yeah, Paris Campbell. Sorry, drawing a blank. Having Wan'Dale Robinson, Sterling Shepard, and Jalen Hyatt as the backups. Was that surprising to you at all? That's the lineup that Mike Kafka went with?
No, I don't think so. Now, they also said there's no designation made for slot, and that surprises me in the traditional sense of NFL and positions. It doesn't surprise me when you think about what they want to do with this offense and be kind of positionless and move guys all over the field. Listen, it's interesting. I said on Monday night, I came in and did some big picture stuff around FanDuel and where some of the division odds are in the NFC North and inside the East as well. But I listed Wan'Dale Robinson, and I said this over on Twitter too. I think that Wan'Dale Robinson is your quiet sleeper here. He avoided the PUP list. You go back and look, it's limited, but the production was there last season, obviously, as a rookie. If he's going to be healthy, I think this might be why, and Jalen Hyatt falls in this category too, you go with the easy ones, right? Paris Campbell is at least an experienced guy. Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodgins are second-year guys inside the system and longer-term guys in terms of Darius Slayton with the organization. So you want consistency for Daniel Jones week 1. You want stability. But we've seen what Jalen Hyatt is doing, right? I think Jalen Hyatt, I think Wan'Dale Robinson, those are the guys that are going to be able to move themselves up the depth chart. Sterling Shepard is interesting. I think we're going to learn a lot these early weeks of the season. Is Sterling Shepard a player that has a real role here? Or is he maybe, a depth guy at the wide receiver position? Maybe some special teams value. We saw him work out at those spots just in case. That's maybe the most fascinating part, that Sterling Shepard could just be a guy on the roster this year. And that should be a good thing, I think, for Giants fans, because it means there's other talent like Wan'Dale, like Jalen, that could be stepping up here.
Yeah, you're right. And the thing is, obviously we talked about who was going to make the roster, but once the dust settled on who was going to be here and who wasn't, Adam, it seemed pretty simple on who they were going to pick. Wan'Dale Robinson just came off the PUP list. To thrust him in and have him start over, say, Paris Campbell, for instance, would have been ultra aggressive and would have been strange for the Giants to do. Sterling Shepard, just coming off of a big injury too, didn't know if he was going to even make the roster. And then you have a rookie in Jalen Hyatt. It made sense to go with Hodgins, who flashed and had 7 touchdowns in 8 games for the Giants. Darius Slayton, who the Giants actively re-signed, is a great veteran piece. And Paris Campbell is that Swiss Army knife that they went out and got in free agency. It makes sense from a depth perspective, and as well as how the injuries shook out over the offseason.
And let me just say, if not week 1, again, early in this season, I think you're going to see, just like we talk about defensively, these different packages, how you want to try to disrupt defenses. Matchups are going to matter a lot here. There are going to be times when I think we will see, the Jalen Hyatts and the Paris Campbells and the Wan'Dale Robinsons and the Sterling Shepards of the world be on the field with, say, a Darren Waller, where you go, hey, we got a bunch of zippy little guys here that are going to run amok, and then the big body gets to go make the play. A Daniel Bellinger gets to make the play, and vice versa, right? You can go all these big bodies. When you get down to the red zone, maybe it is the Slayton, Hodgins, Waller, And then you sprinkle in a little Jalen Hyatt so he can run that quick end around route. We've seen both him and Wan'Dale Robinson going back to last year try to get used in these roles. Paris Campbell obviously has that versatility. So I think the hierarchy has been set. And I also think that all three of those guys are very fluid in terms of other players being able to come in and claim some rep shares. I think the Giants, unlike other teams in the NFL, and this is about the ceiling of these players right now, are probably going to see a more balanced rep share across their wide receiver room than a lot of other places will, right? Darius Slayton need not be locked into the lion's share of reps. It's going to be down and distance, situational football. I think Kafka's going to have a lot of fun this year at that spot.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Adam. And the wide receiver room, the versatility on offense feels very similar to the versatility on defense. That feels literally like the theme of the year. It's like kind of positionless at the wide receiver room, positionless in the secondary. You hope to get creative matchups and put pressure on the opponent's side of the ball. Will be fascinating to see if these depth charts continue, or if a guy like Wan'Dale, as you mentioned, kind of thrusts himself into the lineup and says, I have to play if healthy.
I said it, man, over there. I'll read it. I said over on Twitter. I put my name on it. I don't know the exact numbers. I think I said, don't be shocked if you get a Wan'Dale Robinson 50 reception, 600-yard, 5-touchdown season out of him. And you may say that's not insane, but relative to how much talent there could be on this offensive side of the ball and him coming off of injury, he's going to maybe miss these first 2 games. We'll see what those reps look like and the news and notes we get as we move throughout the week. Okay. Now, we're going to get back into and kind of start our Dallas focus stuff here around Daniel Jones in just a second. But before we do that, as we start to close out this first week 1 preview, we want to make sure that we put our flag in the ground here when it comes to the New York Football Giants. We don't have to game by game, all this good stuff. This is lighthearted, shouldn't take long. What is your record prediction? Now that we've closed out camp, we see the depth chart, we understand the matchups. Where do you stand on the New York Football Giants? Because there's some guys over, some pundits. There's a range here, even including some people that think the Giants could finish under 500 this season.
It's tough. Everyone says the same thing this type of year. A lot of the good teams are like, man, look at the schedule. It's a rough schedule. And the Giants are the 10th hardest schedule in the league. And there's a reason by it. You talk about the Cowboys as a playoff team. You look at the first 5 games, 6 games of the season. You're talking about the first six games, 5 playoff teams, and the Cowboys, the 49ers, the Dolphins, the Seahawks, Bills. You're talking about teams that are looking like they're going to be playoff teams again or are ascending. And so the Giants have a brutal schedule. They get unlucky by playing the Rams in LA late in the season in December. Would have been great to see the LA Rams or teams like the Dolphins late in the season in the cold, just to give you a little bit more of an advantage, right, Adam?
I'm not that worried about the Rams. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Well, some people have them going like 11-6. I'm like, that would be surprising to me with all they've lost. Listen, this is tough. Just looking at the schedule, it really does come down to Monday night and the Giants just getting a win against Dallas. Can you get a win against a double-digit team where you're an underdog to start the season? Because if the Giants
at home, right?
At home. Yeah, and all the cliche rules, just at least get to 500 in your division, which I think is definitely possible for the Giants, especially when you look at getting the Cowboys early on in this season, the way they are on Sunday night, getting the Eagles in week 17. Will that game matter if they're going to be good? We talked about it last year, like yes or no. Look, ultimately, I'm going to go err on the side of going over in the Giants wins of 7.5. And I'm going to go with the Giants finishing 9-8 with a possibility of kind of sneaking into that 6th spot again and being able to make noise. But Adam, I think that there's the floor for the Giants much higher than people think. And I think their ceiling is higher than most people think. So I think their floor is probably 7 games. I think their ceiling could be 11 games, maybe 12, if they come out and they look as good as we think they are.
Okay, so and we had over here record predictions by a lot of people to cover. Barstool had him at 10-7, along with Art Stapleton, Sean Morash, Dan Benton, and the New York Giants Daily, along with Patricia Traina, all 10-7. So the bulk of the record is 10-7. You have one guy, license plate guy, as a matter of fact, at 9-8. Dan Duggan at 8-9, Jordan Renan at 8-9, and Ryan Dunleavy saying 7-10. So three people saying underneath 500. Now, notable on Jordan Renan that I didn't go back and fact check him on this, but I don't see a reason why he would fudge the numbers. That he has been right 8 out of the 10 seasons covering the New York Football Giants on his record predictions. So he has them on the lower end. I agree with you that I think and this is such a finite. I think the Giants' floor is 8 wins. Like I think it's actually over the 7.5, right? Because even though the schedule is tough, if you're worth what you think you are, you have to sweep the Washington football team this year. You're going to get the Cardinals in there. I think there's some other games across this schedule that we can look at and say it's very capable. And I said this when I was looking over at FanDuel as well. It's just it comes down to you never say the season isn't won or lost in a single game. But if you beat Dallas at home, then you can play them tough on the road, try to get that win. And even if you come up short, you circle the Washington games. You don't worry about the Philly games. I'm not saying that in a you're automatically going to lose kind of way, but there you are. You're 500, right? So all of the sudden, everything starts to open up in a way for you that makes it possible to think about getting to 9 wins, getting to 10 wins potentially as well. So I went with 9-8 yesterday, and I said with that possibility for the 10th win, I may say that their ceiling I might be very finite, as in the floor is 8 and the ceiling is 10. Games like the Las Vegas Raiders, games like the New England Patriots in late November, those are going to be really interesting ones. And if you watch me talking about the other divisions, I actually think that Green Bay game is going to be a bit of a trap one potentially because everyone's assuming bye-bye Aaron Rodgers, watch this fall off. Remember, that team was supposed to be good defensively last year. Remember, Jordan Love had time to learn and get seasoned. So, listen, we'll take it week by week. We'll both commit to 9-8 right now. And unfortunately, I don't think we could say right now that locks them into being a playoff team. I'll go ahead and reevaluate about 30 seconds into the Dallas game.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're thinking the same thing I am. I have seen Daniel Jones start to ascend. He's played better,
exactly.
even in the back half of the season last season. Even in that playoff game, he was the best player on the field, and that's including guys like Justin Jefferson and Saquon Barkley. He was the best player on the field. He had total command of the offense, and from everything that we're hearing, especially from some of those media people and beat writers that follow the team all the time, they have said, this is the best vibes, whatever vibes count for. This is the best Daniel Jones has looked. He's looked assertive. He's had command. And you and I are like, okay, if this carries into the season, the Giants really can make some noise. That's why I'm saying, like, if Daniel Jones is really taking this by storm and he is better than Dak Prescott, that opens up the Giants to double-digit wins for sure. Then you start looking at some of those other games that I'm talking about. It's like, okay, you get the Dolphins coming to New York. Like, is that a game that the Giants right now are presumably underdogs in that game? That feels like a game, if Daniel Jones is ascending, that the Giants should win. And so all of a sudden you start saying, like, if Daniel Jones is the guy that we think he is and his ascension continues, that's where the double digits gets really interesting.
Do not forget that the Dolphins, in fact, will be a road game for the Giants. But I do circle that in the way that you're speaking to it, because if we think Daniel Jones is taking that next step, then he should be a better quarterback than Tua. And that's what it comes down to, right? When you think about matchups in the NFL season, you start to think about where does my quarterback stack up against their quarterback? Because I'm the difference maker. Go back and think about a Kirk Cousins matchup in the playoffs last year. Okay, bad defense on their side. Our defense is all over the place. Great. The quarterback needs to go win that game, and that's how I think we're going to treat this season. And to close out this show, let's stay even a little more centric on Daniel Jones, because if he's going to take that next step forward, gosh darn it, having the season opener against the Dallas Cowboys is the perfect place to start, because he is 1-6 career against the Dallas Cowboys. In those games, he's obviously had some ups and downs. He's thrown 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, which, by the way, 1,200 yards across 7 games. The touchdown to interception ratio kind of alludes to, I think, it's hard to get a full sample size. We know what the offense looked like in years past. So Daniel Jones now, with at least what feels like consistency at key positions, with improvement on the offensive line, it starts here. Like, come out week 1 and show that you can go toe-to-toe with Dak Prescott, with that Cowboys defense, and get the win. I've been in a lot of these spaces on Twitter, and I've gone back and forth between the idea of, if the Giants came out and lost that game, and we'll talk predictions on Friday, it's not going to make or break my perception of the season. However, if they win that game, and if Daniel Jones wins that game and looks dominant, that does start to set the outlook for this entire season.
I couldn't agree more. And Joe Shane and Brian Daboll and the entire coaching staff agree with you, Adam. And they agree with you because they decided to lock up Daniel Jones first, before Saquon Barkley. Sure. We know Saquon Barkley is a generational talent at the running back position. But look at the contract. Look who they said, if we can only have one of the guys on the roster, who would it be? They chose Daniel Jones. That wasn't us, right? That's not us gassing up Daniel Jones. It wasn't you handing out that big Aquaman check from Entourage, right? That was not you. And so that's the point of all of this. Daniel Jones was 6th in QBR. Dak Prescott was 12th. You and I both agree that we think if Daniel Jones is ascending, he is a better quarterback than Dak Prescott. And I know that's gonna make people frustrated to hear, but that's where we think he should live. And that's why this game is so important. I know he's 6. You kind of look at the offensive line and the offensive weapons that Daniel Jones has had the last few seasons that he's played them. Don't know if it was necessarily a fair fight, but this does feel like a fair fight. This is a game that's a field goal either way. Go out and win the game, perform well, and show that you are, if not one of the top 2, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC East. I really am looking forward to this game because there's still a lot of people that are still pointing to that contract that he signed in the offseason and think it matters now when it really doesn't. But man, would it be a nice cherry on top, Adam, if he just goes out and shuts everybody up and they say, well, good on Joe Shane for signing him.
And at the end of the day, that's what we'll dive into on our Friday episode. We're going to give our predictions. We're going to talk more about key matchups. Set it at the top. Remember that Coach Ed and I are going to be breaking down the cornerbacks, Trey Hawkins, Deonte Banks, the rookies, and then beyond. How is that secondary going to be utilized situationally throughout this game? So that'll be coming up on Thursday. Then we'll come back in. We'll talk fantasy. We'll talk the betting lines as well. And we'll even sprinkle in some of our big season-long perspectives. And Andy, narrowly forgot, but I routed myself back into it. Before we get out the door here, because we won't be back in before our preview show, we do have the NFL coming up on Thursday night. And that means that the season will officially begin with the Detroit Lions at the Kansas City Chiefs. They are going to be laying the Chiefs 5.5 to Detroit. We know that we have Travis Kelce laboring a little bit with an injury, so a question mark there. Our season series kicks off, and yes, I have dominated, Andrew, year over year. The record shows that, even if we don't keep track of it necessarily in an official kind of way. Where do you go opening night?
Well, the Travis Kelce news is really interesting. Like as we're recording right now, the latest news is his ACL is intact. That doesn't sound very good for his possibility of playing. That's like when they're like he was alert, he was awake. Like you're like this is not good for like short-term prognostications, right? Who knows if that means we still don't know if he's going to be active for the game. It sounds like I would be shocked if he is.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a tough one, Adam, because a lot of people love the Detroit Lions. They love them. They are the darlings that are coming in. I'm going to lay the 5.5, even without Travis Kelce here, because it's the first big, huge game defending Super Bowl champs on the road, starting the season. It feels like everyone is on the Lions bandwagon, but the other team has Patrick Mahomes, and that is always going to be a deciding factor for me. I'm going to lay the points. I just don't know if the Lions are where everyone else thinks they are yet, and maybe I'll look foolish in game one. They're going to come out and win and say, we are contenders in the NFC. What do you got?
Hey, listen, over under set at 52.5. It will be a road game for Detroit, so that's a hard spot to come out and say, let's pump my chest here and prove to the league what we are. But plus 5.5, I like it. I think it's going to be a close game. I think that their offense has a nice collection of weapons there. One of my favorites, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jared Goff has outperformed expectations since going to Detroit, the castaway in the Matthew Stafford trade. And yet here they are being a team talked about as favorites by FanDuel standards to win the NFC North this year. The hype may be a little bit overstated, but I don't mind this being kind of a field goal game late. And I'll go ahead and take Detroit. So that means when we come out of week one, already someone is going to be massively ahead and someone's violently behind. Get over to YouTube, everybody, because that's where we're doing these shows. You can see our beautiful faces. We can find out what luxury resort will Andrew broadcast from next. You can also get us over on Twitter at Adam Armbrecht, at AndyMac214, and at One Giant Podcast. Give us a follow. Support us. Again, stay tuned for daily content this week leading up to the official start of the Giants football season. And until next time, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.